We are now well into the second week of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with no sign yet of any let-up in Vladimir Putin's bloody assault. The speed and scale of the attack has shocked the world and left many of us scrambling to work out both the short-term and long-term effects of the biggest war in Europe since the Second World War. There are so many questions about this crisis, but over the next few minutes we're going to attempt to provide some answers to some of the biggest issues raised by Putin's war. So can Ukraine defeat Russia? In a situation like this, of course, no outcome can be ruled out. By sheer numbers, Russia has dominance, according to the International Institute for Strategic Studies. They outmatch Ukraine in military manpower by almost 5-1. And you can see that Russian troops are making progress, even if it's not as fast as might have been expected. But Ukrainian forces are fighting back, perhaps harder than anticipated. And Western allies are looking to step up the supply of military hardware to improve their chances of resistance. Still, most military experts believe that in the end, Russia's overwhelming firepower will win out. Would NATO go to war with Russia over Ukraine? Now, this has been a question since the start of the invasion, and it's easy to see why, considering the history of tensions between NATO and Russia. Currently, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, meaning that it does not benefit from Article 5 protection. Article 5 of NATO is the principle of collective defence. An attack against one ally is considered an attack against all allies. NATO wants to avoid going into direct armed conflict with Russia, a stance confirmed by NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg after a meeting of NATO foreign ministers last week.
NATO is not seeking a war with Russia.
Over recent days, President Zelensky has called on NATO to provide a no-fly zone. But Boris Johnson and other Western leaders maintain that such a move will bring them into direct confrontation with Moscow, something at this stage no one in the West is prepared to consider, amid fears it would escalate the war in Europe. What are sanctions, and will they make a difference? Since the invasion, Western allies have imposed tough economic sanctions on Russia. Now, just to recap, an economic sanction is a diplomatic tool put in place to try to change the decisions of a state actor that is going against international norms of behaviour. In this case, the measures are designed to isolate Russia and paralyse its economy. Collectively, the US, UK and EU have imposed hundreds of sanctions, including banning Russian flights from their aerospace, cutting off Russia's largest banks from their financial systems, significantly Germany shelving Nord Stream 2 and freezing assets. This includes Putin's personal assets and those of Russian oligarchs. Now, by sanctioning oligarchs, the West hopes pressure will be put on Putin's inner circle. But Britain has been accused of moving too slowly to target individuals linked to the Kremlin. Western allies are now discussing a ban on the import of Russian oil, a move which will have serious implications for Moscow and the rest of the global economy. Sanctions are very much a long-term measure aimed at changing Putin's strategy, and it may mean the Russian president turns to China and away from the Western economic system. But with many major companies now boycotting Russia and the ruble falling sharply against the dollar, it is already clear that the country's economy is coming under intense pressure. How serious is the risk of nuclear war? This is a question a lot of people have been asking since Putin put his nuclear arsenal on high alert last week. Russia even made a claim, without evidence, it should be said, that Ukraine is developing a dirty nuclear bomb. So what does the British government think about this? Brinkmanship and rhetoric? Well, that's at least according to the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab.
I think it's rhetoric and brinkmanship, and Putin's at various times, I mean, he's got a track record as long as anyone's arm of misinformation and propaganda.
But how many weapons does Russia actually have? Although all figures are just estimates, according to the Arms Control Association, Russia has 6,257 nuclear weapons. The US has 5,500 and the UK 225. Most analysts see Putin's high alert as a warning to the West not to get involved, rather than a legitimate threat of using nuclear weapons. But after Russian forces attacked one of Ukraine's nuclear power plants last week, we would be foolish to completely disregard his sabre-rattling. Is Vladimir Putin already a war criminal? There are increasing calls for Vladimir Putin to be prosecuted for war crimes. And the International Criminal Court is now investigating the actions of Russian troops in Ukraine. Prime Minister Boris Johnson even said in Parliament last week that the use of munitions on innocent civilians, in his view, fully qualifies as a war crime.
What we have seen already from Vladimir Putin's regime in the use of the munitions that they have already been dropping on innocent civilians, Mr. Speaker, in my view, already fully qualifies as a war crime.
Malcolm Grinston, a senior research fellow at the Imperial Centre for Energy Policy and Technology, even said that the shelling of a nuclear power station in the city of Zaporizhia is a war crime.
It is a war crime to attack an operating nuclear facility because, however careful, and I'm not sure there was a great deal of care taken here, but however careful you are, inevitably you can't be sure that weaponry is not going to go astray.
An advanced team has been sent by the International Criminal Court to the region to start compiling evidence amid reports that more than 2,000 civilians, including children, have already been killed since the Russian invasion started. For the latest news and analysis on the Russia-Ukraine war, head to standard.co.uk. We're also on social media, so follow us on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok.